We live in a world of stark contrasts. While many enjoy peace and prosperity, there are corners of our planet gripped by conflict, violence, and instability. In this video, we're going to take an unflinching look at the 10 most dangerous countries in the world in 2024, from active war zones to nations crippled by crime and political turmoil. We'll examine the factors that make these countries perilous and the human toll exacted by this instability. We'll rely on data from reputable sources and, where possible, first-hand accounts to provide you with a grounded understanding of the risks these nations face. Understanding the realities of these volatile situations allows us to engage in more informed conversations about global affairs and the challenges faced by people living in these countries. Want to stay informed about global risks and travel safety? Subscribe to AtlasMap for the latest insights. For over a decade, Syria has been synonymous with conflict and suffering. The civil war that erupted in 2011 has shattered the nation, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Large swathes of the country remain outside government control, controlled by various armed groups, including remnants of ISIS. Over 500,000 people have been killed, with millions more displaced. The destruction of infrastructure has crippled the economy, leaving much of the population reliant on humanitarian aid. The presence of foreign powers complicates the situation, making a lasting peace seem a distant prospect. Afghanistan has been ravaged by conflict for over 4 decades, leaving its people grappling with poverty, violence, and political instability. The return of the Taliban to power in 2021 has ushered in a new era of uncertainty and fear, particularly for women and girls who face severe restrictions on their freedoms. The United Nations estimates that over half the population requires humanitarian assistance, with food insecurity, displacement, and economic collapse posing significant challenges. The Taliban's harsh interpretation of Islamic law has led to widespread human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings, disappearances, and restrictions on freedom of speech and assembly. The country is also a major hub for the illicit drug trade, fueling corruption and instability. Despite the challenges, there are glimmers of hope. The international community continues to provide humanitarian assistance, and some Afghans are working tirelessly to rebuild their lives and communities. However, the road to peace and stability in Afghanistan remains long and fraught with obstacles. The legacy of war and the Taliban's oppressive rule continue to cast a long shadow over the country, leaving the Afghan people facing an uncertain future. Often dubbed the world's worst humanitarian crisis, Yemen has been ravaged by civil war since 2014. The conflict, which pits the Yemeni government, backed by a Saudi-led coalition, against Houthi rebels, has plunged the country into chaos and devastation. Millions have been displaced from their homes, and the country's infrastructure lies in ruins. The UN estimates that over 20 million Yemenis are facing acute food insecurity, with many on the brink of famine. The healthcare system has collapsed, leaving millions without access to basic medical care. Children are bearing the brunt of the crisis, with malnutrition, disease, and the threat of violence defining their childhoods. Despite international calls for ceasefire, the fighting continues, fueled by regional rivalries and the proliferation of arms. The humanitarian crisis deepens with each passing day, pushing Yemen further into the abyss. The world must not forget the plight of the Yemeni people. Somalia has been plagued by instability and violence for over 3 decades, leaving its people grappling with poverty and conflict. The fragile central government struggles to exert control beyond Mogadishu, with large areas controlled by the Al-Shabaab militant group. Al-Shabaab, linked to Al-Qaeda, wages a brutal insurgency, carrying out bombings and assassinations. The group's activities devastate ordinary Somalis, displacing communities and hindering aid efforts. The country is also highly susceptible to natural disasters, with recurring droughts and floods worsening the crisis. Despite the challenges, there are glimmers of hope. The Somali people have shown remarkable resilience, and efforts to rebuild the country continue. South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, has been mired in conflict since its independence in 2011. A power struggle between President Salva Kiir and his former deputy, Riek Machar, plunged the country into a civil war that has claimed the lives of hundreds of thousands and displaced millions more. The conflict has been characterized by ethnic violence, widespread human rights abuses, and a catastrophic humanitarian crisis. The UN estimates that over 7 million people, more than half the population, are in need of humanitarian assistance, with many facing severe food insecurity and malnutrition. The country's infrastructure is in ruins and basic services like healthcare and education are scarce. Despite numerous peace agreements, the fighting continues, fueled by political rivalries, ethnic tensions, and access to resources. The South Sudanese people continue to bear the brunt of the violence and instability. Iraq has been scarred by decades of conflict and instability, from the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s to the US-led invasion in 2003 and the subsequent rise of ISIS. While the Iraqi government declared victory over ISIS in 2017, the group continues to pose a security threat, carrying out sporadic attacks and exploiting sectarian tensions. The country is also grappling with political instability, corruption, and economic challenges. The legacy of conflict has left the infrastructure in ruins and the economy struggles to recover. Unemployment is high, particularly among young people, fueling frustration and social unrest. Sectarian violence between Sunni and Shia Muslims remains a major concern, often exploited by extremist groups like ISIS to sow discord and recruit followers. Despite the challenges, there are signs of progress. The Iraqi government is working to rebuild the country and strengthen its institutions, and there are ongoing efforts to promote reconciliation and dialogue between different communities. However, Iraq faces a long and difficult road to peace, stability, and prosperity. The presence of militias operating outside government control further complicates the security situation, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty. The Central African Republic, or CAR, has been trapped in a cycle of violence and instability for years, ranking among the world's poorest and most dangerous countries. A coup in 2013 plunged the country into a civil war that has pitted armed groups against each other, often along religious lines. Despite the presence of a United Nations peacekeeping mission, violence against civilians remains widespread, with reports of killings, sexual violence, and forced displacement. The conflict has exacerbated existing tensions between Christian and Muslim communities, leading to cycles of revenge attacks and deepening the humanitarian crisis. The country's weak institutions and widespread corruption have hampered efforts to address the root causes of the conflict, allowing armed groups to operate with impunity and exploit the country's resources. The lack of security and basic services has displaced millions of people, leaving them vulnerable to disease, hunger, and further violence. The international community has pledged support to stabilize the Central African Republic, but progress has been slow and fragile. Since the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, Libya has been mired in chaos and violence, with rival governments and militias vying for control of the country. The power vacuum created by Gaddafi's demise allowed armed groups to flourish, transforming Libya into a battleground for competing factions and regional powers. The country is now effectively divided, with two rival governments claiming legitimacy and a patchwork of militias controlling different territories. The ongoing conflict has had a devastating impact on the Libyan people, displacing hundreds of thousands, crippling the economy, and fueling a humanitarian crisis. Despite international efforts to broker a political solution, Libya remains deeply divided, and the prospects for peace and stability remain uncertain. The country's future hangs in the balance, with the potential for further fragmentation and violence a constant threat. Africa's most populous nation, Nigeria, faces a complex web of security challenges, from the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast to banditry and farmer-herder clashes in the northwest and central regions. These overlapping crises have displaced millions, fueled a humanitarian crisis, and undermined the country's stability. Boko Haram, notorious for its brutality and abduction of schoolgirls, has terrorized northeastern Nigeria for over a decade. While the Nigerian military has made some gains against the group, it continues to carry out deadly attacks, targeting civilians and security forces alike. In the northwest and central regions, banditry and clashes between farmers and herders over land and resources have claimed thousands of lives and displaced entire communities. The government's response to these crises has been criticized as slow and ineffective, further fueling insecurity and lawlessness. Beyond these immediate security threats, Nigeria also grapples with widespread corruption, poverty, and inequality. Addressing the root causes of conflict, strengthening governance, and investing in human development will be crucial to unlocking Nigeria's potential and building a more peaceful and prosperous future. Once a prosperous nation, Venezuela has been plunged into a political, economic, and humanitarian crisis of unprecedented proportions. The country's descent into chaos began under former President Hugo Chavez and has accelerated under his successor, Nicolas Maduro. Hyperinflation has ravaged the economy, rendering the currency practically worthless and leaving millions struggling to afford basic necessities. Food and medicine shortages are widespread, and the healthcare system has collapsed, leading to a resurgence of preventable diseases. Maduro's authoritarian rule has further exacerbated the crisis, with widespread human rights abuses, suppression of dissent, and a crackdown on political opponents. Millions of Venezuelans have fled the country in search of a better life, creating a refugee crisis in neighboring countries. Those who remain face a daily struggle for survival, caught in a vicious cycle of poverty, violence, and despair. Venezuela's future hangs in the balance, with the potential for further unrest and suffering a stark reality. From the shattered streets of Aleppo to the drought-stricken plains of Somalia, the countries we've explored paint a stark picture of the human cost of conflict, instability, and governance failures. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of these challenges, but understanding them is the first step towards meaningful engagement. By shedding light on these forgotten corners of the world, we can foster greater awareness, encourage dialogue, and perhaps inspire action. If you found this information useful or eye-opening, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts on the countries listed.